What is up, y'all? We are checking out Labyrinth by Randall Sullivan. This is continuation of chapter 6. Hit the thumbs up button.
I was convinced pretty quickly that the implication of the crypts was a smokescreen. The only question was, who had been blowing the smoke? On April 14th, Poole became the first LAPD officer to speak at length with Biggie Smalls' mother, Voletta Wallace. The woman was blunt in stating her belief that, as she put it to the Los Angeles Times, the police don't care about solving the murders of young black men. She was especially skeptical about a white detective who sounded to her like a character out of a cowboy movie, Wallace admitted. Russell Poole, however, was a police officer who had been praised again and again for an unusual ability to win the confidence of people who had lost loved ones to gang violence. Empathetic was an adjective that appeared repeatedly in his personnel package. In dealing with the friends and family members of homicide victims, Detective Poole is compassionate, sympathetic, and most of all, never too busy to make himself available to discuss the status of the case. His supervisor at South Bureau Homicide had written in 1995. He consistently leaves them with the confidence that he sincerely cares. That was true, agreed Voletta Wallace, who eventually would describe Poole as the single officer of the Los Angeles Police Department whom she felt could be trusted. For her, the reason was quite simple. Detective Poole wanted to know who my son was. None of the others ever asked.
Wow.
For most of her adult life, Voletta Wallace had worked 2 jobs to raise her only child in the 3rd-floor walk-up apartment on St. James Street in Brooklyn's Clinton Hill neighborhood. Though a young girl when she moved to New York City from Trelawney, Jamaica in 1959, Voletta still spoke in the lilting accent of her native island. Biggie's father was Jamaican also, a small-time politician and businessman named George Latour, who abandoned the family before his son was 2 years old. Biggie saw Latour once more at the age of 6, but grew up without any memory of the man.
Wow.
Christopher Wallace was the largest 5-year-old in his neighborhood, and at the age of 10 already was known by the other children as Big. Voletta, who worked days as a preschool teacher, enrolled her son at St. Peter's Claver Elementary and Queen of All Saints Middle School, where he was on the honor roll and won awards as the best English and math student in his class. Biggie also began well at one of Brooklyn's best public high schools, Westinghouse, but rapidly lost interest in all his classes except art and, to his mother's immense displeasure, dropped out during his junior year at age 17.
Oh, wow.
He could make money on the streets, Biggie knew, as a dope peddler. Soon he was venturing east up Fulton Street into Bedford-Stuyvesant, selling weed and nickel bags of crack cocaine on street corners. He talked a lot tougher than he was, according to the officers of the 88th Precinct, who remembered Wallace as a soft, scared kid who would cry whenever they brought him in for questioning. When Biggie was busted for selling crack during a visit to North Carolina in 1991, he phoned his mother in tears, pleading with her to send the $25,000 he needed to make bail. Soon after his return to Brooklyn, Biggie went back to selling $3 vials of crack in front of a Chinese restaurant on Flatbush Avenue, but he also began spending a lot more time at the home of a childhood friend named Chico Del Vico. In a small back room, the two used a pair of Technics turntables to begin mixing the sounds that Biggie gradually flavored with lyrics about life on the street in Clinton Hill. Almost everyone who heard the pair remarked that Biggie seemed to have a natural gift. His mother believed it was hereditary. Rap has roots in what Jamaicans called toasting, a musical form that originated with island disc jockeys like Duke Reed and Prince Buster, who spoke aloud over the American R&B records they played at blues dances in Kingston's ghettos. Early on, the DJs shouted simple phrases like "work it" and "move it up" that evolved into longer and longer toasts. Eventually, toasting stars like U-Roy began to create lengthy sing-song rhymes backed by steel drums and a heavy bass line. Bronx DJ Kool Herc, who had been born in Kingston under the name Clive Campbell, was heavily influenced by Jamaica's toasting tradition when he began to pioneer the music form that became known in America as rap during the early 1970s. Almost 20 years later, Christopher Wallace and Chico Del Vico formed a DJ group they called 50 Grand, and began working street corners and small clubs with a crew from Bedford Avenue that called itself the Old Gold Brothers. Eventually, Biggie began to perform solo as Quest.
Hit the thumbs up button, guys. Hit the thumbs up button.
And produced a crude set of homemade demo tapes. Eventually, one of those tapes made it into the hands of the Brooklyn rapper Mr. C, who passed it along to the new national director of A&R at Uptown Records, Puff.
Rest in peace to Mr. C. He just passed away, I believe, last year, if I am mistaken. Or it might have been the beginning of this year or last year. Hit a thumbs up button.
Combs. Puffy was transfixed. As soon as I put it on, it just bugged me out, he later told MTV. I listened for days and days, hours and hours, and his voice just hypnotized me. Biggie's voice was unique in rap, husky and harsh, yet melodic and musical in a way that made speech sound almost like singing. And Puffy, like a lot of people who heard those early tapes, loved Biggie's lyrics. His mother thought Christopher had developed his ear by listening to the nursery rhymes she read to him every night as a preschooler. His tales of small-time gangsters, street scuffles, sexual intrigues, and bloody climaxes were, to Combs' ear, the first really authentic gangster rap produced on the East Coast. The success in the late 80s of NWA's Straight Outta Compton and the rapid rise of Death Row Records had transformed rap almost overnight. East Coast groups like Def Jam's LL Cool J and Public Enemy were eclipsed by what Dr. Dre, Ice-T, and Snoop Dogg were doing on the West Coast, but Biggie played bad better than anybody who had come before him. He would never have Tupac Shakur's sex appeal, but Biggie's look was unlike anyone else's. A hulking fat boy whose favorite meal was waffles with ice cream and bacon, Biggie's wide, round, pouchy eyes and pudgy, hairless face gave him the look of an immense child, while his deadpan scowl and wandering left eye suggested just enough menace to make him interesting. Even as a drug dealer, he'd paid attention to his wardrobe, working the streets in a fashionable ensemble of Timberland boots, Karl Kani jeans, and hockey jerseys, topped by a terry cloth headband. When he became Biggie Smalls, a name borrowed from a character in the Sidney Poitier Bill Cosby film Uptown Saturday Night, the combination of his dark skin and pale pink lips with the pinstriped suits and derby hats he wore suggested a fellow who'd been recruited off the Chitlin circuit into Al Capone's mob. I may be a big black ugly dude, he once told an interviewer, but I got style. Style for gangster rappers was the product of an outlandish cross-cultural fertilization that combined ghetto gangbanger attitudes and Rastaman spirituality with the patois of Hollywood mafiosi, and Biggie had a natural affinity for all the form's origins. Puffy Combs told the 19-year-old he was poised to become a major star, but then one night in 1993, Biggie learned that his mentor was out of a job. Puffy immediately began organizing a plan to launch his own record label, one that would be built around Biggie Smalls. Puffy's greatest challenge was making Biggie believe it could still happen. Despondent over Puffy's ouster from Uptown Records, Biggie had a pregnant girlfriend, a best friend, Damian Butler, who was behind bars, and a mother who had just been diagnosed with breast cancer. Drunk most of every day on the Hennessy cognac he imbibed, Biggie was tempted to return to the streets with his vials of crack, but Puffy hustled to distract him with small jobs performing on remixes with other rappers. Finally, after working on it in the studio for months, Puffy was ready to release Biggie's first solo album under a title that was even more sadly ironic than his posthumous Life After Death. Ready to Die, Biggie's debut on the Bad Boy label, produced two singles that hit #1 on Billboard's chart, Big Papa and One More Chance. Both went double platinum, and One More Chance was named Billboard's Rap Single of the Year. Biggie, who was not quite 21, had become rich and famous overnight. Performing now as Notorious B.I.G. because another rapper out in California had called himself Biggie Smalls first. He was voted Billboard's Best Rap Artist in 1995. By then, though, the lethal idiocies of life as a gangster rapper already were beginning to threaten not only his success, but his very existence. For a lot of it, Biggie had only himself to blame. Biggie and his entourage were arrested for the 1994 beating of a music promoter named Nathaniel Banks in Camden, New Jersey, a charge that put the rapper in jail for 4 days. Then in March of 1995, Biggie and a friend became annoyed by autograph seekers as they were leaving the Palladium near Manhattan's Union Square and exchanged shouted threats with several men in the crowd. When the fans jumped into a taxi to get away, Biggie and his companion gave chase, caught the cab a block away, then proceeded to smash the vehicle's windows with baseball bats.
The cab
After his
driver.
arrest, Biggie was forced to
Why would they do that? The cab driver ain't had nothing to do with it. Why would you do that? The cab driver, he just driving the people. You gonna bust up the cab driver shit? He ain't have nothing. He just picking up a fare. That's fucking stupid.
plead guilty to criminal mischief and harassment. 3 months later, he was arrested in New Jersey for robbery and aggravated assault. Though the robbery count was dismissed, the charge of assault still hung over Biggie at the time of his death. In July of 1996, police in Teaneck, New Jersey, raided the courts of Glen Point townhouse that Biggie had purchased for $310,000 8 months earlier and confiscated an infrared rifle, a submachine gun, several automatic handguns, a revolver, a huge cache of hollow point bullets, and the rapper's marijuana stash.
Oh damn.
Assorted weapons and narcotics charges that resulted from the raid were pending at the time of his death. Biggie was arrested again in September of 1996, 2 days after Tupac Shakur's death, when he and several other rappers were caught smoking pot in Biggie's limousine while it was parked in Brooklyn. That same month, Biggie's left leg was fractured in 3 places when Lil Caesar lost control of
Yeah,
Biggie.
that was back in the day in the '90s, boy. But weed was looked at. You might as well have crack on you. You got caught smoking weed back in the '90s. You know what I'm saying? They looked at weed, especially in New York.
His SUV on the New Jersey Turnpike. He spent 2 months at the Kessler Institute for Rehabilitation and was still in a wheelchair when the clinic released him just before Thanksgiving. Biggie's deepest fears, however, arose out of the hatred Tupac Shakur had harbored against him ever since the shooting at Quad Studios. Biggie insisted he had nothing to do with that attempt on Tupac's life, but the release of his record, Who Shot Ya?, while Shakur was in prison at Dannemora, was widely perceived as a taunt. Biggie at first seemed to view the East versus West feud as grand theater, a terrific publicity stunt that would help both sides sell records. When Snoop Dogg and the Dog Pound began shooting their mocking New York, New York video in Times Square, Biggie went on local radio to tell one station's listeners, "This is our city, and you know the beef we have with these motherfuckers." Biggie laughed off the fool from his neighborhood who emptied a pistol into one of the Death Row Crew's trailers, but began to realize how serious the war between Bad Boy and the Los Angeles label had become in July of 1996, when he went to Atlanta on behalf of Puffy Combs to perform at a huge outdoor concert where Suge Knight was represented by Tupac Shakur. During Biggie's set, Shakur's crew began to chant, "Tupac, Tupac, Tupac." Then, on the way to their hotel after the concert, Biggie and his bodyguards became convinced that they were being followed by a van filled with paid killers. Biggie's bodyguards had their Glocks locked and loaded as the vehicle they rode in made a series of reckless lane changes before speeding onto an interstate highway. The van stayed with them, though, and soon was joined by a pickup. The 3 vehicles shadowed one another for nearly an hour before Biggie ordered his driver to stop and his bodyguards prepared for a shootout. Only then did the van and truck speed away. After Tupac released his I Fucked Your Bitch record, Biggie shot back with Dumb Rappers Need Teachin', Lesson A, Don't Fuck with B.I.G., that's that. And he seemed almost to be boasting when he spoke about the feud with Tupac for the documentary Rhyme or Reason. One man against one man made a whole West Coast hate a whole East Coast and vice versa. Biggie's attitude became much more sober after Tupac's death, however. "I had nothing to do with any of that Tupac shit," he told Spin magazine. "That's a complete and total misconception. I definitely don't wish death on anyone. I'm sorry he's gone. That dude was nice on the mic." Biggie even admitted how afraid for his life he had become. "I think about it every day," he told MTV. "Every day it's real. That's how real it is. I think somebody's trying to kill me. I'd be waking up paranoid. I'd be really scared." Nothing demonstrated how seriously Biggie took his situation more than his sudden embrace of the Christian faith that was central in his mother's life. In Los Angeles, he'd gotten his first and last tattoo, a scroll of parchment printed with a long passage from Psalms 27. "The Lord is my light and my salvation. Whom shall I fear? The Lord is the truth of my life. Of whom shall I be afraid? When the wicked, even my enemies and foes, came upon me in the flesh, they stumbled and fell." Biggie had seemed to publicly proclaim his religious conversion by wearing a large crucifix to the Soul Train Awards. Biggie wrestled more with his fear than his faith on life after death. The album opened with the thump of a beating heart. Over that, Biggie began talking on the phone to Puffy Combs, telling his producer that he had been thinking about suicide. Gunshots
See,
cut the conversation short and Biggie fell to the floor. Then Puffy was at Biggie's bedside in the hospital, telling him they were an unstoppable pair, destined to rule the world, and that they had a lot of living left to do. His voice was gradually drowned out by the flatline tone of Biggie's heart monitor. On Miss You, a rap dedicated to a friend who had been shot dead on the street in Brooklyn, Biggie admitted that he cried for 3 days afterward, even though the deceased was a thug. Life After Death ended with a song that featured Faith Evans. You're Nobody Till Somebody Kills You was his favorite cut on the album, Biggie told Billboard, because it brings to mind the expression, you'll miss me when I'm gone.
see,
When Biggie arrived in Los Angeles during early February of 1997, though, he tried once again to sound unflinching. If he had to pick, his choice for a home would be the East Coast, because that was where he grew up. Biggie rapped in a song for his new album called Going Back to Cali. But that didn't mean a nigga couldn't rest in the West. California had the weed, the women, and the weather, Biggie told the source.
do it. Here's this white guy say these. A nigga can't rest in the. That's funny. That was funny. Hit a thumbs up button.
He confided to an interviewer from Vibe that he was going to buy a house in LA and insisted, I get love out here. And if they don't love me, they are going to learn to love me. If I'm scared, I'll get a dog. Biggie sounded more worried about flying to London than about whatever risks he faced in LA when he phoned his mother from his suite at the Westwood Marquis on the afternoon of March 8th. Biggie had been scheduled to leave that morning for a promotional tour in Europe, but Puffy canceled the trip. Just as well, Biggie said, since he didn't feel that enough bodyguards had been hired for the week he was to spend in London. He had off-duty cops guarding him in L.A., Biggie told his mother, and felt safe with them around. Her son told her he was going to a party that night, Valletta Wallace recalled, but only because Puffy wanted him there. The night before, Biggie had told a Vibe reporter that he was no longer ready to die. I think there are a lot more lessons that I need to learn. There are a lot more things I need to experience, a lot more places I need to go before I can finally say, okay, I had my days. When he lumbered out of his hotel suite that night, though, Biggie wasn't wearing the bad boy medallion Combs had given him, that diapered baby wearing work boots and a baseball cap. Instead, the rapper wore a golden Jesus hanging on his cross.
Wow, that is some deep stuff, man. And then he ended up passing away a couple of hours later. I remember that. That was like back to back. Like I remember this. I remember when Tupac passed away. I was in high school. I think I might have been like in the 12th. Yeah, I was in 12th grade. I think I was getting ready to graduate. And then Biggie got. That's crazy though. Yeah. I think Diddy wanted Biggie there because Biggie didn't have to go there. He should have never been out there, man. That was a stupid move. He shouldn't have came back out to LA till maybe 2 or 3 years later. Like he should have really, or you know what I'm saying, if any, like he should have really stayed away from LA. I don't think he realized how serious, especially people looking at him, like it was like they was still investigating. Well, I think they still are investigating. They got Keefy D, but they still investigating. You know, at that time, because I think this happened 6 months after Tupac passed away. It wasn't even a year yet. So I think he should, no, it was, let me see. He passed away in September, October, November, January, February. Biggie died in March. So that was like less than 5 months later. You know what I'm saying? Like, he shouldn't have been nowhere near LA. You know what I'm saying? That was the messed up move on Puffy. You know, he even though he was smart and a hard worker, Puffy wasn't too smart when it came. He had an ego problem. He had a very bad ego problem. And I think that was ego. Nah, I ain't gonna let them, you know what I'm saying? I'm gonna go, you know, we can go up in LA. He ain't gonna do, you know what I'm saying? We ain't gonna let this stop us, you know. That ego, no, dude, it's a safety precaution. You know? They think, people think that Biggie got something to do with it, and you taking them into the lion's den, you fool. Like that was a bad move. He should say, hey, man, we're going to do everything. We're not messing with LA right now. At least we're going to let this Tupac thing kind of die down before we go to LA. That'd have been smart. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? Anyway, rest in peace to that brother. Hit the thumbs up button, guys. What do y'all think? Leave it in the comments.
Looking for a professional photographer for your next big event? Need video of your special day? Then look no further. For $100 an hour, have a professional photographer or videographer shoot your wedding, birthday party, quinceañera, bar mitzvah or bat mitzvah, anniversary party, or whatever your special occasion may be. Highlight your event with professional, crisp photos and video. Check out Charles Arness Photography on Instagram, as well as book us for your next event. Must live in the Southern California area.
Nonetheless, Terry just unloaded on him, said Martinez. I could see him getting angrier and angrier. I heard your fucking track, Dre said, in Terry's recollection. Fuck you, bitch. Fuck you, Mr. Ultimate Breaks and Beats, she yelled back, referencing a popular series of vinyl albums containing sample-ready breakbeats. One more fucking word, he added, a threat she ignored. And he punched me in the eye, she said. And when I didn't go down, he punched me in the mouth. He punched her hard, really hard.
For more of these fascinating stories and true crimes, subscribe to Charles Arness World. Thanks for watching.
What is going on, y'all? We checking out Diary of a Madman. Brad Scarface Jordan, the legendary hip-hop artist from the legendary group Ghetto Boys, and a solo artist. We checking out his memoir. I forgot what I was ready to say about this. Scarface just performed last month. I saw him in concert last month, 420 at the Forum in Inglewood. Yeah. Still sharp, man. But let's go and get into it. I'm gonna come back with my reaction. That thumbs up button.
Recording contract, you were also forced to sign to the label's management and the label's publishing company. Looking back now, it seems so obvious that it was a bad situation for us. But we were kids. We didn't know shit. The whole time I'm thinking, it's cool. Jay's my homeboy, and my brother's not going to let anything happen to me. He'll make sure we're all right, and we're all helping each other get ahead. But that's on us. Jay would always say,
right,
you need to make sure you get a lawyer to look over this before you sign. But the way I was looking at it, it was like, get a lawyer to look over what? See, Jay had lawyers, and we had him. Every lawyer we knew wanted $600 an hour to consult on a contract. Why do I need to stretch myself thin and spend a few $1,000s to get a lawyer to check out a few pieces of paper that are coming from a friend? And then you've got to remember, I was 16 when I signed, and I was just so happy to get on.
Oh, damn.
$50,000 is a lot of money when you're that young, much less a couple of $100,000, especially when it means that you can get out of the streets and stop risking your life or your freedom just to make a buck. But as time goes on, you look around and start to realize that the label's really growing and that there's some real money to be had in the music business. And then you start thinking about who's bringing in a lot of that money and who's making all of the records that everybody's talking about and who's really helping to build the label into a powerhouse and a destination. But you can't get any straight answers about the bread. And it just starts to be like, well, what the fuck is really going on here? I remember hanging out with Cool G Rap back in the early 90s, around the time we cut Two to the Head with Bushwick Bill and Ice Cube for his Live and Let Die album. This was the song Biggie later sampled me saying, "So die, motherfucker, die," for Ready to Die. And G-Rap was telling me he was about to get $250,000 for something or another. And I was like, God damn, that's a lot of money. No offense to G-Rap. He's a fucking legend, and he deserves every dollar that ever came his way. But the Ghetto Boys had hits. Mind Playing Tricks on Me was a top 40 record with crossover radio spins. It was a certified gold single with over 500,000 copies sold, and I didn't know anything about a $250,000 payday. After We Can't Be Stopped and Mr. Scarface's Back came out, I got a check for about $137,000. Looking back and knowing what I know now, I know I was getting fucked. It's the oldest story in the book. It was always something. Like, I'd get a statement with no check attached, and then when I'd ask what happened to the royalties on that project, or why I wasn't getting paid, they tell me it was because I was unrecouped or some shit.
You didn't make the money.
Or let's say there was a $700,000 advance from Priority or Virgin for a project, and we spent $350,000 to make the album. It would turn out that the $350,000 we spent was my half, and the other half went to the label. It was like we were slaves coming to the master after picking the cotton, looking for some sort of compensation for all of the hard work, only to be told, well, looks like the crop didn't come in this year like it was supposed to. Maybe next year. And this was every 6 months. I'd get an advance or enough money to eat so I could keep working or maybe get a new car, almost like a handout, like, here, take this. I never knew what exactly I was getting paid for at any given time. More often than not, at some point, I'd be told that I actually owed the label money.
Oh, damn.
I was almost always unrecouped. Whenever I'd ask about seeing some paperwork to clarify everything, the response was always the same. We're getting it together, or we'll have it for you soon. And so we'd go back out on the road, come back to Houston, ask about seeing the documents, and they hit me with, oh, we had to put someone else on it because the other guy fucked it up, or, oh, right, we're getting it together now. Always something.
Looking for a professional photographer for your next big event? Need video of your special day? Then look no further. For $100 an hour, have a professional photographer or videographer shoot your wedding, birthday party, quinceañera, bar mitzvah or bat mitzvah, anniversary party, or whatever your special occasion may be. Highlight your event with professional, crisp photos and video. Check out Charles Arness Photography on Instagram, as well as book us for your next event. Must live in the Southern California area.
Always not delivering. And when I would finally see the statements, there were so many deductions, there was no way I'd have anything coming to me, and I probably owe the label again. I think even if the contracts could be read a different way, there were just so many loopholes that it felt like there was no way I could ever get a fair deal. And this went on for years. But James just kept selling me a dream. He was an incredible salesman. It was always next time. Next time I stopped by, or next time I had a hit. Next time it would all get worked out and we would all get paid. Just next time. Of course, then next time would turn into 5 years, which would turn into 10 years, which would start to turn into 20 years, and finally it'd just be like, God damn, bro, when are you going to start sending me some fucking money? And I'd just be back in the same cycle. Well, we just set up a new accountant, or we're looking at it, but we've got a new system. And the next thing I know, years have passed, and I haven't seen anything explaining what money was coming in, where it was coming from, where it was going, why it wasn't going to me, nothing. All of that time, and I haven't seen shit. And the worst of it was, in order to get an advance on the money I'd already made for records I'd already sold, it seemed like they would always ask me to sign a contract extension. It didn't matter what I needed the money for. Even if it was to bury a family member, the response would always be, cool, but before we can cut you a check, just sign up for a few more albums and a few more years on the label. Again, this is for records I'd already made and sold. It just felt like they always had me over a barrel, and I was fucked. I just never thought James would do me like that. We'd both started together trying to make something off of music, make an impact, be heard, and get rich. I saw every gold and platinum album, Every song used in a soundtrack or in a commercial, every show, every guest verse, every new signing as our victories and our wins. Together we were beating a corrupt-ass, fucked-up system by rewriting the rules and creating a whole new playing field for a brand new game. But they weren't our victories. They were his. And to anyone coming up in the game, please take this advice. You get in the homeboy business and you think you're going to make it with your friend. But the sad truth is, 9 times out of 10 in that situation, your homeboy isn't going to play fair because he isn't really your friend. It's on you to handle your business. Act accordingly. As for me, after my homies didn't deliver my big payday as planned, I stopped recording. I was mad done.
Hey, what's up, y'all? We're gonna check it out. Earl by DMX, the autobiography of DMX. Earl, this is chapter 17, A Weekend in the Hamptons. Hit that thumbs up button, and I'm gonna come back with my reaction. Hit that thumbs up button.
17. A Weekend in the Hamptons. The number of stolen cars I drove around Yonkers, it's ironic. The first time I was actually caught for the crime was in Long Island. It was Friday night, and I was with a friend I met at Children's Village named Dre. We had just picked up a nice Toyota Corolla limited edition and were bored with driving around Yonkers, hollering at the same girls, seeing the same niggas on the corner. So Dre came up with the idea to drive to Long Island. He said he had family we could chill with and could definitely find a hot party to go to. I didn't have a better suggestion, so we got on the highway. We probably should have thought how long a trip it was, though, because since we didn't leave New York until after 3 a.m., we didn't get to Long Island until the sun was coming up. So much for going to a party. So we just crashed out at his people's house. They lived in this small country-looking hood on the outskirts of East Hampton. In the morning, we chilled with his peoples for a little while and then decided to go get some beers. I didn't think anything of it then, but none of his family came with us. In the late 80s, the Hamptons was even more the home of the rich and the white than it is today. Even though East Hampton was probably the most metropolitan of the 4 towns in the area, it was still extremely unlikely to find 2 teenage black kids driving around in a brand new car. The rappers driving Bentleys invasion hadn't happened in the Hamptons yet. Black folks like Dre's people lived on the other side of the train tracks, and that's where the ruling townsfolk expected them to stay. But we didn't know that. I had already learned what you don't do when you're not familiar with where you are. But Dre was 15, 2 years younger than me, and the whole trip, he had been driving real extra, and I could tell he was thirsty to act out. When we pulled in front of the grocery store, I told him to chill. Yo, when I come back with the beer, we can go to the park or something and relax. Of course, when I came out of the store, Dre was gone. So here I was, early Saturday morning, standing in the middle of Main Street, East Hampton, holding a bag of beer. Not the move. Then, just as I started to walk up the block to look for him, I saw a police car drive past, and guess who was in the back seat? This motherfucker went and got knocked. My first instinct, being the loyal kid that I was to try to find my way back to his people's house to get help. The problem was that I really couldn't remember where their place was. All I knew was that it was in a row of raggedy houses that didn't look like nothing nearby, and after about an hour of walking around the neighborhood getting lost, the same police car finally rolled up on me. This time, no Dre. I was still carrying that bag of beer. Hey kid, where are you going? I got some family that lives out here, I replied. Yeah? Well, what do you have in the bag? Beer? Aren't you too